UFC 296 will take place on December 16th in the T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas, Nevada, and it is a card that is stacked from top to bottom with a series of high-profile matchups. A classic pairing of old plus new in the form of Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett, a scintillating flyweight championship showdown between Alexandre Pantoja and Royval, and a welterweight headliner featuring Leon Edwards and Colby Covington that truly has the potential to go either way. Let's take a closer look at the very best of UFC 296 to understand why it is a card you cannot miss out on. Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. So what's the overview here? It's one of the sport's biggest underdogs, the unlikely success story of Leon Edwards against MMA's greatest villain character, the former interim champ Colby Covington. These are two polar opposites with two incredibly distinct fighting skill sets who have five-minute rounds to get the better of one another. And while both men are more than capable of fighting in different areas, it is, to some degree, a classic striker versus wrestler pairing. The fight will take place on US soil, but with guys like Paddy Pimblett and Ian Garry on the main card, it does have a decidedly European feel to it. Colby might get the crowd on his side, but don't make the mistake of underestimating just how valuable that head kick KO was to Leon's stock. His reputation as the real-life Rocky of the UFC has made him far more popular than anyone could have imagined during his rise. And for as much as the fan base generally likes Covington and his gimmick, there are still many people out there who would love nothing more than to see him out cold on the canvas. So how do the odds makers see it? Well, the betting lines are quite close, and understandably so, with Odds Shark having Leon narrowly ahead as a minus 125 favorite. Colby, who is by no means ruled out of the contest, comes in at even odds to take home the win. But are the odds makers calling this one a lot closer than it should be? Well, let's take a dive into the skills possessed by both men and, more importantly, how they might match up at UFC 296. Leon Edwards has been seen as one of the most underrated fighters in the sport for years now, a supremely technical talent who has very solid fundamentals in every facet of the fight. And in his last two matchups against Kamaru Usman, Edwards showed us quite a lot. In their first bout, despite getting dominated for large portions of the bout, that beautiful fifth-round head kick finish proved that he had the heart of a champion, as well as a finishing instinct that we have not seen before. And in their trilogy fight, his first title defense, Edwards looked like an athlete who had finally hit his potential. There was a confidence in the way he dealt with Usman's aggressive pursuit of a takedown, and by the time the 5 rounds were through, it was clear that this was a far more complete performance than the 5th-round Hail Mary that won him the title. As far as athletes go at 170 pounds, Leon kind of has the perfect build. His long and lanky frame doesn't just help him in the striking department, but he's also one of the finest clinch technicians in all of MMA, period. He's not a big puncher per se, but his ability to control pace and distance is truly excellent, and something that could be invaluable against Colby if he can stop the takedowns. Some MMA fans look at Kamaru Usman and see a very similar fighter in Colby Covington. But make no mistake, Colby presents challenges that are entirely unique to him. We all know about his wrestling and his overall takedown threat, but Covington has stood in there with highly capable strikers like Rafael dos Anjos, Robbie Lawler, and Jorge Masvidal, and had more than his fair share of success. Colby is a volume striker in ways that Usman is not. And while sure, both guys love nothing more than wearing their opponents down over 5 rounds, Colby has a very different way of doing it. His boxing isn't devastating in its power, but Covington brings attrition to the table, and his ability to break his opponents makes him a uniquely interesting challenge for Edwards. Because we have seen Leon slow down in the past. Colby is also incredibly durable, and although he's not much of a submission threat, his ability to control and keep his opponents working underneath him is a major tool in this bout. So what are some X factors coming into this bout? Well, the confidence of the champion cannot be understated. If there were any doubts in Leon Edwards' mind over his ability to assert himself as the best 170-pound fighter in the world, that performance against Usman last time around showcased a fighter who was hitting his potential. Leon now knows that he has the type of defensive wrestling to deal with the most powerful wrestler in the weight class, and then Colby again is a different fighter. Edwards still has that knowledge in his back pocket. For Colby, his inactivity has been a problem. And against the current crop of elite welterweights, to say that Covington is unproven would be putting it lightly. In fact, out of Covington's last 5 wins, Damian Maia, Rafael dos Anjos, Robbie Lawler, Tyron Woodley, and Jorge Masvidal, sure all were elite wins once upon a time, but only one of those fighters, RDA, is not retired now, and he's not even fighting at 170 pounds anymore. Colby has only fought one member of the top 15, Kamaru Usman, and he of course lost that fight twice. In recent years, Colby hasn't been too active. In fact, the last time he fought more than twice in a year was 2016. And in 2020, 2021, and 2022, he has made just one appearance in each year. Leon isn't the most active fighter in the UFC, but he's at least making appearances more than Colby, and this fight will be his third in 16 months. But Colby has one major ace up his sleeve. Covington is a far greater trash talker than Leon Edwards, and in the face of Colby's bullying style of mental warfare, the more soft-spoken Edwards could find himself totally drowned out. If anyone is going to make this card a big seller, it's going to be Colby. And even though he hasn't been active, there's no denying that he's just as famous as ever. Leon doesn't exactly seem like the type of guy who could be drawn into getting overly angry in the cage, but Covington's ability to bully his opponents cannot be understated. Leon is a better striker, the more accurate and impressive technician in there, but he's not guaranteed to be dominant whenever the fight is standing. Colby is clearly the best wrestler with a better gas tank. But as we saw in round 1 of Usman Edwards 2, Leon can have huge moments on the mat against elite-level wrestlers. Neither man is truly known for their finishing ability, and so if you're a betting man, perhaps it would be wise to expect a decision either way. Overall, these two guys are very well-rounded, and though it might be wrong to expect a highly entertaining fight, we're sure that the competitive tension will be extremely high by fight night. So what's our early prediction? Well, as we mentioned before, Colby's inactivity is a real problem for him, especially approaching 36 years old, which is definitely on the far end of a welterweight's prime years. Sure, he seems like he hasn't stopped training during this time, but Covington's best moments in the cage have come against opposition that were clearly from an older generation. Guys like Maia, Woodley, RDA, Lawler, and Masvidal. These are not the new generations of talents. Colby came in and picked off some of the era's greatest 170-pounders, but Leon Edwards, at 32, is very clearly in his prime right now, and he is spearheading a generation that has an entirely different level of versatility in mixed martial arts. And with his length, his accuracy, and his well-roundedness, there is a very good chance that Leon can totally shut down Colby here, that he can make the challenger look his age in there. And while Edwards isn't known for his finishing ability, in spite of that insane Usman head kick, don't be surprised if he can hurt Colby in there at some point. It might be a big ask to bet on a late finish by TKO, but putting your money on Leon Edwards by a comfortable unanimous decision seems like the most logical decision. There's a good chance this could be more competitive than we think, and could you imagine a world where Colby Covington is UFC champion? But we gotta stick with the more proven talent here, the guy who has all of the momentum behind him. Covington would shock the world if he could pull this off, given just how much is stacked against him, and for our money, the Leon Edwards era at 170 pounds is going to continue into 2024 when all is said and done in the UFC 296 main event. Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. The co-main event is a far less straightforward affair. In fact, the pairing that will lead into the UFC 296 main event might be the most difficult fight to predict out of the three. The first title defense in the reign of the newly crowned flyweight champion, Alexandre Pantoja, will put him directly in the path of one of the 125-pound division's most proven action fighters. It's kind of crazy that Royval has not yet contended for UFC gold, but with the quadrilogy featuring the former champions Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo, it's good to see the division being allowed to move on and grow. Between Demetrius Johnson's long reign and the tie-up of Moreno and Figueiredo, 125 pounds needs to spread its wings a bit, and a fight like this is just about as fresh as it gets. So how do the odds makers see it? Well, they certainly seem to have a considerable level of faith in the newly crowned Alexandre Pantoja, placing him as a heavy -260 favorite with Brandon Royval as a decent underdog at +200. Is there a reason to believe that people might be sleeping on Royval's chances? Well, the thing about Pantoja that he proved last time around against Moreno is that biting down on the mouthpiece and going to war with him isn't always the best idea. Pantoja is a grappler by trade, and it's important to point out that he has faced and beaten Royval in the past. Pantoja's ability to find the back is quite possibly the best in all of MMA right now, and it was a rear naked choke that got him the win last time around. But Royval has improved since then, and he brings considerable height and power to the table, boasting a 5'9" frame that is quite long for the division. And though he is liable to get finished himself, he also brings a level of chaos with him that could prove tricky for Pantoja. The champ is an excellent grappler and a very good striker, especially when things get wild. Judging off his most recent run of form, it does seem like the fighter to eventually beat Pantoja is going to have to bring patience and a solid outside striking game to the table, because he seems to have Royval beaten in a lot of areas of the fight. And Royval's not really the type of guy who's going to point fight with him. No, this is a matchup that is likely going to look similar to most of Royval's fights and Pantoja's last bout with Brandon Moreno. The formula is clear, the UFC wants a war. Pantoja has a granite chin and the heart of a lion, and while this fight places him in the path of one of the division's finest finishers, if guys like Moreno and Figueiredo couldn't do it, it's hard to see anything other than a Pantoja victory on the scorecards here. But this co-main should be an absolute barn burner. Of that, there could be little doubt. Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett. Finally, the featured fight of the night will be the 3-round collision of the veteran Tony Ferguson and the rising talent that is Paddy Pimblett. Is this a case of the UFC feeding an old, much depleted legend to a newer, more bankable attraction? Or is there any actual reason to believe that Tony Ferguson still has something to offer in this sport? Well, it goes without saying that a prime El Cucuy would likely destroy Paddy the Baddy, or at least the vast version of the Liverpool native we saw. But this is not the same Tony Ferguson. No, the decline of this former interim champion has to be mentioned in the same breath as the likes of PJ Penn's fall from grace. It's not quite as bad, but each passing appearance from Ferguson is making it harder and harder for his fans to stomach the idea of him continuing onwards. So if we're going to match these two fighters up ahead of UFC 296, we can't hold on to our memories of what the now 39-year-old Ferguson used to be. And the odds makers might seem to agree that this is a very tough matchup for Tony. His placement as a plus 300 underdog to Pimblett's minus 380 is a crude reminder of just how far he has fallen. On the surface level, this is a matchup of two highly competent grapplers who enjoy throwing down on the feet. Overall, Pimblett has the more well-rounded grappling base, but Tony is quite an unpredictable and versatile submission threat. However, when faced with a powerful and confident top game, Ferguson's offense can be stifled. Paddy's ability to control his opponents and hunt for submissions should give him an advantage over this older, slower, and more predictable Tony Ferguson. The difference between these two guys on the mat could actually be greater than some people expect. Guys like Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira are higher-level grapplers and wrestlers than Paddy, it seems, but Tony is losing steam with each passing fight, and no fan should be surprised to see him come in and get dominated on the mat. But while this bout is standing, does Tony have a fair shot? Well, if you recall his fight with Michael Chandler, that was probably the best-looking Ferguson we've seen since his thrashing at the hands of Justin Gaethje, up until Chandler was able to land that fight-ending and potentially career-altering front kick to the face. But Tony didn't look terrible in that bout, and he did manage to drop the former Bellator champ. Subsequent appearances against Nate Diaz and Bobby Green have not done a lot for our confidence in Ferguson, though. But he does pack power, he is capable of using his reach and awkward movement to set up unorthodox strikes, and though he has taken a lot of punishment, there is still some level of durability there. Tony is a cardio freak, although there's no way he's as good as he once was. But against a more rudimentary striker like Pimblett, Ferguson can have moments, make no mistake about it. Paddy is a very unpolished striker. He swings wide and hard, coming in with looping punches that an El Cucuy uppercut can absolutely beat with a well-timed counter. He has that shot in his arsenal, and Paddy is a very hittable opponent, maybe the most hittable fighter Tony has faced since his days as an unranked lightweight. But Paddy could also bring a lot of power to the table, and if these two decide to slug it out, Ferguson's lack of head movement will cause problems. And considering how Pimblett fights, he doesn't necessarily need to be the better, more technical mixed martial artist to win this one. His chin is better than Tony's right now, just as his recoverability should be enough to tip the scales in his favor. Don't be fooled by the very sour mood surrounding this one. Ferguson is not out of this bout, and the UFC matchmakers have made the right decision in giving him a step down in competition once again. But Pimblett is the fighter who is being made to look good here. And if he could rock Tony or drop him to the mat, there's a very good chance that you see Paddy look very dominant from the top position. The idea of Ferguson winning a grappling matchup here is very unlikely, and even as striker, if he meets Pimblett and tries to put on a show, there's a very good chance that he fails miserably. Is it the end of the line for Ferguson? If he loses to a guy like Pimblett, moving to 7 straight losses, can Dana White actually look the media in the face and tell them that he's not going to cut Tony loose? We're not quite there yet, but we're getting eerily close to BJ Penn territory here. Paddy has a lot to gain from beating a guy as revered as Tony, and a lot of casual fans will take some major name value from this fight no matter which way it goes. But for our money, the odds makers are calling this one well. Paddy should be able to hurt Tony on the feet, drop him to the canvas, and pick up a submission win before the first round is through. It'll be one hell of a return for Pimblett, but Tony Ferguson fans might be watching this one with some major concern. But how do you see each of these 3 major matchups playing out? And which picks are you most and least confident about? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed listening in on all of the latest news from the MMA world. Thanks. Bye.